Here with
Taylor.
and we are here for Man versus Tech, and our autofocus is going crazy right now.
Yeah.
So today we are going to be talking about iterative design, what that is, what that means, what that really looks like. Taylor, what is iterative design?
Basically, I mean, in the past for me, it was like, let's say, kind of throwing back to the last episode, like I was making a PI, and you start out with like a base design, kind of a minimum viable product, and then you just kind of go in steps. You kind of improve it each kind of iteration. Each iteration, you get a little bit better and better, and in some cases, where they'll make, like, most car brands have like model years where they totally redo the model. It's like a completely different design. But throughout the 4 or 5 years they have for that design model run, they'll just make small increments of like improvement. And so that's basically what I think about that.
So iterative design is a design methodology, right? Use some fancy words. And in it, you come up with an idea, you figure out how to implement that idea, you implement that idea, you test that idea, you get feedback, and then the cycle starts all over.
Exactly.
And you just keep going little by little. I think one of the main benefits of iterative design is because it's small incremental change, right? If you make a mistake, it's not a big mistake.
Oh, no.
And if you make a mistake, you can go back pretty easy. It's easier to undo something small than to undo something big.
So there's less risk in trying new things.
Less risk in trying new things, and trying new things is how a lot of innovation occurs.
Yes.
And then also, if you do something good, you can then build on top of that. You can keep building little bits of good on top of each other.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to, shoot for the moon right off the bat.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So I think it does make sense. So let's talk about how we've used iterative design here. Now, let me preface this by saying, iterative design is a word, right? While it is a concept that gets implemented in software design, it can really apply to anything.
Oh yes. Any type of design at all.
Well, I like to think of baking because my wife is a baker. And she likes to bake things. I can't bake to save my life. But she will, and my daughters are gluten-free. And so she's gone through a lot of trial and error to figure out some good gluten-free recipes for things. And so whether it's, we need more oat flour or more rice flour, more xanthan gum, all these things, she's tweaking the proportions little by little and seeing, does this make it better? Does this make it worse?
So you're saying your wife does human testing?
She does, yes. And actually, I don't mind it because she got these chocolate lava cupcakes, the Petitfours. I love that Petitfour glaze that's on there.
I've never had that.
Oh, yeah. So I don't mind being a guinea pig for baked goods, as you can tell by the shape of my face. So, but all that to say, iterative design isn't just for software development. It's for anything where you can make small tweaks, measure the change. That's a big thing, right? If you can't measure it, you don't know if it's successful or not. So you got to be able to measure the change, and then act upon that measurement, that analysis that you do.
Oh, definitely. I think another small part of iterative design that I don't hear quite enough, and it might be because it's kind of it is a small part of it, but if, let's say, you've got, some new type of technology, you've got a new kind of feature that you want to test out, but you wouldn't necessarily roll it out as a program in itself or a product in itself. You could kind of attach it onto a already successful product that's already got its big changes being done through iterative design, which compared to the changes you'll make on this new thing are quite big because you've got more comfortable with it. So you can have this thing kind of have a good start instead of it just being a product you're putting out and it just flops, and people with backing it with money see that and they're like, oh, we don't want to invest in that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, you can add it as a function to an
Mhm.
existing product
Yes.
instead of as a standalone option.
At least just trying to get it started and fleshed out.
Yeah.
It's really helpful to those small fledgling type of technologies.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a really good point. All right, so we've got a couple specific examples that I want to go over with iterative design, and so the first one, oh, that is supposed to be silenced. Okay, so the first one is going to be a project that we did recently on oil and gas leases. We did a 30-day due diligence project, pretty tight timeline. And the top concern were consent to assign and notification to assigns.
Mhm.
And so, and we have an existing model
Yes.
that can look for consent to assign paragraphs, notifications to assign paragraphs, the general assignability clause. But they wanted it specifically broken into 4 options. Hard consent,
Mhm.
which is basically we have to have the landowner's consent to be able to assign this lease to somebody else, and they can say no for any reason they want to. Soft consent, we have to have the landowner's permission to assign this lease to somebody else, but they can't be unreasonable about it. And there's certain key words in there: reasonable, unreasonable, that kind of thing.
Sure.
Good reason, those kind of phrasings. And then for notifications, there's the regular notifications. Hey, here's a letter just stating we signed from company A to company B. Have a nice day.
Mhm.
Versus a notification that requires a copy of the recorded document.
Mhm.
And some of these assignments can be quite lengthy. This assignment was almost 4,000 leases.
Yes.
And so you might get an exhibit on there. And I didn't see the final exhibit myself, but I know that what I did see, including all the assignment language, the exhibit on there, it was over 20 pages.
Oh, yeah.
Which means you're having to mail out a minimum 20-page packet to every owner that needs that second kind of notification, not a consent, but notification there.
Mhm.
And so we had to take our existing model and make some changes.
Yes.
The first thing we did is we looked at a small batch, right?
Mhm.
So that's one thing with iterative design. You want to start small and grow bigger.
Yes. Yeah.
It reminds me of cleaning products. You ever used carpet cleaner and read the instructions? Most people don't read the instructions. But
I've not read the instructions.
so it always says on there, and same thing when you get to laundry, and I'm real particular about laundry, but it'll say on there, test on a non-obvious or discrete part of the carpet or upholstery or garment, whatever it is, so that you can see if it's going to discolor anything.
Oh, yeah.
And so
It turns your black carpet just white.
yes, stuff like that
Yeah.
you want to avoid. So you want to test on a small subject. So we started with just 20 leases.
Yes.
So we took our existing model
Mhm.
and we broke it into the 4 specific true falses that they needed.
Oh, yeah.
And then kept the same paragraph that we had. So now we took the 4 fields that they wanted and we broke it out into actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We broke it into 9 fields.
Yes.
There are 4 true falses plus a consent specific paragraph, a notification specific paragraph, the general assignability clause. So just the analyst could, while reviewing, double check and see like, oh, there's no consent language or notification language in this paragraph. And then also some keyword searching.
And getting that whole paragraph, they wouldn't have to look through the entire document
Right.
for that paragraph.
Yeah. So want to make the job easier on the data review, because the review and feedback is a very important part of iterative design, right? So we ran this on the first 20 leases, and while we did have 9 fields that we were looking for, we based all of our metrics on the 4 fields. And we are next to a fire department, if you can hear the horns in the background. Godspeed. So hope everyone's okay.
Yeah.
So there were 4 fields that really were cared about by the customer, by the land team for this due diligence project. And so looking at those 20 documents that we tested on first, we only had 1 error. Okay. So what's 1 out of 20 being wrong. What's our margin of error there? 5%?
Yes.
Yeah, 5%. So 95%. But there were 4 fields, right?
Mhm.
And we were actually wrong about one of the fields. There was only one that we were wrong about.
So
So 1.25%?
possibly.
Yeah. So
it depends on how you look at it.
Depends on how you look at it. That's a great thing, right? Statistics. There's different ways to look at it. So we were somewhere between 95 and 99% accurate, depending on how you measure it.
It's
for
pretty good.
The first run.
Pretty good.
It's only 20 leases.
Yeah.
You know, it's not a big deal.
But out of 4,000, that percentage of that number of documents that would have had that error would be much higher.
Yes. Now we then took that feedback for that one that we got wrong,
Mhm.
implemented it, and ran against a bigger test. We added 400 documents to actually more than 400 documents. I forget exactly how many. 400 something documents. And we basically went through this in 4 stages, right?
Mhm.
And so when we did the 400 documents, we actually had more errors. Our error rate was closer to 80%.
Yes.
But we had a much wider test pool,
Mhm.
and we got a lot more feedback.
Oh, yeah.
And we were sitting at about 80%. And then we added about another 700 documents for the third run on there, and we were back at 99% accuracy.
Mhm.
Out of that, which is now over 1,000 documents, the 20 plus the 400 and change plus the 700 and change, I think it was around 1,300 documents at that time.
Oh, yeah.
There was only one more, or there was only one error out of all those. So we're again at greater than 99% accuracy for that.
Mhm.
So then we ran it against the whole thing, so out of that group, they only found one error again out of the almost 4,000. So you can see where the iterative design, we're taking out margins of error every time.
So I'm kind of noticing 2 types of iterative design. So with this type of iterative design, we're basically trying some stuff and then fixing it.
Mhm.
But other, I guess, more general iterative design would be just adding new features here and there. So
Yes.
for us, that would be adding more specific extractors, or
Mhm.
Adding more fields that need to be captured that would help the reviewer's job be easier. So if we kept adding more fields and stuff, that would be kind of a different type of iterative design.
And that's a great point, because that's exactly what we did on this same project. By the time we got to our third testing phase, we also added minimum royalty clauses.
Oh, yeah.
And that was 3 fields. We had a true false. We had pulling out the full paragraph. We had the keyword search function in there. We had our general royalty clause in there just as a backup, because it wasn't just minimum royalty. We also had a timely payment clause in there that we were looking for. Our Pew clause, our shut-ins. A lot of times, shut-ins and royalty amounts are put into the same paragraph, unless you have an addendum that modifies them. So we did add more fields as they were getting feedback and seeing. And you may think, okay, Kyle, there was one mistake though. Well, that's why we had the humans review it, and the humans could then review it very quickly. We're not trying to replace the humans.
Oh, no.
We're trying to make them faster, more efficient, so that they can do their job better, quicker, stronger, smarter, all the different errors. But if you look at it, okay, one mistake out of 20, we're calling that 99%. One mistake out of 1,300, we call that 99%. One mistake out of 3,700 and change, we still call it 99%, because it's not 100, right?
The point is the decimal place.
It's a smaller margin of error each time.
Oh, yeah.
Because one wrong out of 3,700 is smaller than 1 over 1,300. It's almost 1/3 of that.
Interesting. But if you look at the first test of the 20 documents, it was 95 to 99% error, depending on how you looked at it. And let's just call that 99%. We had 99% error rate, or 99% of the fields were not in error.
Correct.
And then the next test for 400, we had 80%. And then the next test with 700, we had 99%.
Yes.
And then 99% for the final test.
Yes.
But I would say 95% somewhere in 95 to 99% is the average between all those tests.
Across all the tests, because that 80 really drags it down.
We had a pretty good sample to start with.
I think so.
That's pretty good.
I think so. And
which is not always the case. Sometimes you
No.
have just a not representative sample.
that is true. That is true. Sometimes you have a bad training set to use. And, so let's talk a little bit about training set size. 20 documents is not a lot,
No.
right?
Mm-mm.
So that's where growing it comes into play.
Yes.
Especially when you want to move quickly, like we had a 30-day clock to be done with this, right?
We had to go.
Yes. So we didn't want to start with 4,000
No.
and have to go all the way through 4,000 with our training before getting any feedback.
Yes.
So iterative design helps you get started quicker too.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Makes you more agile, to put it into like business people terms.
I like it. Okay, good stuff. And so we talked about improving the quality. We talked about improving or increasing the quantity as well with the more fields. Let's look at another example.
Okay.
Revenue checks.
Yes.
You deal a lot with revenue checks.
Yes, I do.
For anyone not aware, so we're talking about some oil and gas specific documents. Revenue checks. I mean, any check is revenue, right?
That's true.
So when we say revenue check or revenue statement, what are we talking about?
So basically, the simplest one to explain would be like you've got interest in a well, and the operator is going to send you money based on what they make, and they give you the percent interest that you have in that well to you. But they have to kind of give it an itemized form. So it might be deductions that they take out. They've got to list that. They've got to list the production per month, and so the quantity, the cost for that quantity, and then basically any taxes, deductions. That's kind of the most important part, I would say, and just making sure it adds up to the check total. And the big issue with revenue checks is there are so many different styles that it's just really hard to make a consistent model for. You end up having a lot of models under like one family kind of classification model that will determine which submodel will be run. And that becomes very complicated very quick.
It does. So when we started with just one model though, right?
Yes.
We started with just one thing. And so let's talk about Wolfpack. Okay. Wolfpack, we've mentioned Wolfpack before. Wolfpack makers of Land Pro. Now they have Land Vantage also. Wolfpack ERP accounting is what these revenue checks would go into,
that's true.
right?
Yes.
They're accounting for JIB and revenue accounting. And so these revenue checks, it's not just a check face, right? It's a big, basically a table or series of tables. How long can these things get? One page up to?
The longest one I've seen was a few thousand pages.
Okay, a few thousand. That's a lot of details.
Pretty. It would take you a very long time to hand key that into like Excel.
Yes. So most people, what they would do at that point, if they don't have an electronic download, they would just put in who it's from, when it came in, and what the dollar amount was, and not worry about the details, which potentially leaves a lot of money on the table.
Some of these are very expensive.
Yes.
Lots of money being thrown around.
And so, if you want those details, which can be very beneficial, you need something like this model to read through. So let Wolfpack. So you get a Wolfpack check-in. Think back. I know you've been doing this for a couple of years now.
Yes.
So think back to the first revenue check you got. We put it into the system. You have to make a model that works on that check, right?
Yes.
You send that to somebody for feedback. They give you feedback. What happens then?
Well, you freak out for a second, just because the feedback, you're like, I don't know how I'm going to do this.
You want to schedule that in.
Yeah, you schedule your free 5 minutes. You could just like freak out, tear the shirt off, cry a little bit, throw up maybe. But then you just kind of go in, and you might have to just overhaul the entire thing for the first few times. I know I had to rework the entire thing. By thing, I mean model, at least 2 times. Before I could start making like, okay, I'm going to make sure this works. I know this is probably not going to work, but I know that this part works. So I'll make small changes to that, and I'll just keep kind of, once I get that going good, I'll start making changes to this part which I don't really know how to do yet. And
All
just
right.
kind of figure it out as you go.
So let's relate this back to baking, right? So let's say you're making chocolate chip cookies.
Yes.
And you make a cookie and you give it to somebody and they're like, this is too salty and too chocolatey.
Mm-hmm.
It may not be a good idea to just reduce the amount of chocolate and reduce the amount of salt. You might switch to an entirely different recipe and wait until you get a good review, a good feedback, and then build on top of that to get it to the great stage.
And they could have been like, it's too salty, but that chocolate's really good.
Yeah.
And you could be like, okay, I'm going to keep the chocolate. That I found the right one. I just need to find a different cookie recipe.
Yeah. So it could be the right chocolate, maybe the wrong amount.
Yeah.
So you might, like I said, you might need to just throw out the entire recipe or just keep a little portion of it. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. I guess that's a big part of it.
Yes. I mean, it's just trial and error, learning as you go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. So now you make a second model.
Yes.
You go through all the same steps.
Oh, yeah.
You run through, and now you get feedback again.
Mm-hmm.
What's that look like?
Not as much freak out. It's going to be more small changes. That's kind of where I'm at today.
Mm-hmm.
Like it hasn't progressed much. The process has progressed more. How I work with other people has progressed, but the whole getting feedback and making changes is exactly the same. There might not be as large changes. Like before, I would have to redo the whole order of processes. Like I would have this. Try this type of row within the table first before you try this type of table.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's more, I need to add just a little variation so it catches like state withholding tax instead of just withholding tax.
Okay.
So just kind of some very minor variation. So the time that's gone from the first time I got feedback making changes where that would take maybe a day or two, maybe up to a week, depending on the changes that need to be made. Now it will take maybe 10 minutes.
Yeah, that's a good point. Is as you're making these changes, because they're small changes, and as you get more comfortable and as your feedback gets more consistent,
yes,
the time that you go through that loop is shorter.
Yeah, every time. It keeps getting shorter.
Yeah. Which helps because you can add more test documents, a larger test pool, and because each one's moving quicker, it doesn't elongate. You're not going from 1 check to 10 checks, takes 10 times as long. It's quicker than that. So it's not orders of magnitude bigger.
Not at all. No.
Okay. So you go through your Wolfpack check. You have now got it. It is production ready. Accounting gets it. They're like, thank you. Great. We're importing this into our accounting system. Here's some checks from OG Sys, an operator that uses a different accounting program to print checks.
Vastly different.
What do you do?
I try running it through the first one, knowing nothing's going to happen. It's not going to print anything out, but just kind of like, just see. Maybe something works.
I think that's a good point. Maybe something works. It doesn't hurt. It might take a little bit of time, but you can see it gives you a little bit more time to get familiar with the document.
Oh, yeah.
And you can see if there are any similarities that the computer can see that maybe you didn't see as a person.
Oh, yeah.
Because these things being dozens or hundreds of pages long, it can be overwhelming. And frankly, looking at 2 checks that might be radically different styles to an untrained eye, and you're not an accountant, right?
No, I wouldn't say so.
All right. So, when you are looking at these, they may look very similar on the surface.
Yes.
And then when you get nitty gritty with it, because you've got the nitty gritty with it, you might be like, oh, these are radically different.
And if you saw, I kind of feel like the normal person, if you saw the difference between Wolfpack checks and OG Sys checks, they're radically different.
They're radically different. Now,
to anyone.
Is it radically different like an apple and an orange, or is it radically different like a Washington Red and a Granny Smith?
Those two specifically, those are more like apple and orange.
Okay.
Very, very, very different.
Okay. So there are some similarities though, right?
However, Wolfpack in like an Integra check or an inertia check might look related.
Okay.
They're like
oranges, lemons, and limes.
Yes.
Grapefruit, maybe.
Or maybe OG Sys and Wolfpack, they're fruits. You can tell they're checks. But Wolfpack and inertia are more like an orange and a tangerine.
Okay.
It's kind of weird cousins of each other.
I love it. I love it. This is great. And I like citrus.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've done your Wolfpack model. It's working great. Accounting's happy. They give you an OG-SYS model.
Yes.
You run it through for the first time to see what sticks.
Yes.
Right? What do you do?
Well, I see that there's certain things that stick, kind of like the check number extractor, kind of things that don't need to rely on the structure of the document, because that's the real big difference between rev checks and kind of revenue documents in general, kind of like JIBs and stuff. But the ones that don't rely on the structure of the document, I'll take to a new model, and then everything else, it would be easy to kind of copy and paste certain things. But at that time, I didn't have extractors at the base level, kind of like the things that would extract numbers or text or small things that you would then group together to make giant extractors that could take out the entire line.
Mhm.
So those little base building blocks weren't quite there yet. So I would just make it from scratch because I figured, let's tailor it to this check specifically.
Taylor and Taylor.
Tailor, and that's why I chose that word. Yeah. That was on purpose.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. So I would just kind of redo everything from scratch as far as the ones that would rely on the structure, because they would be very specific to that document type. But fast forward to now, by doing that, I've been able to make like a standard type for like numbers and dates and production codes.
Mhm.
And that increases the turnaround time. When we get a new check style, we can just easily just focus on form. Like, how do we arrange these things to make it extract?
Okay, so I heard two things in there. One is when you get the new check, you might go through the iterative design cycle yourself using internal feedback.
Yes.
You, even though you're not an accountant and not an expert, can see like, okay, I know that this isn't meeting expectations. What can I do to make it better before I get outside thoughts?
Like before it even gets to accounting, I'm just like, that doesn't look right.
Yeah.
Before I was like, I don't know what looks right. So you're learning how to give your own feedback.
Yeah.
So your iterations it might take longer to send out an iteration for review, but it will be more complete, and you can get better feedback because it's more complete.
Well, and it's the appearance of a longer iteration because it's actually multiple iterations that they just were out of the loop on.
Kind of sub iterations. Yeah.
And then the other thing that I heard you say is that it changed your development style too.
Yes.
Instead of like a Lincoln log where you have one log and you got to put this log here and that log there, it became like Legos. We were like, okay, well, how long does this wall need to be? I need these 8 pieces. Oh, and over on the other side, I can use those same 8 pieces in a different order.
Yes.
Which looks radically different, but is actually the same building blocks.
So it was kind of like with the Lincoln log pieces. It was like before I was trying to make my own pieces from trees I found.
Okay.
Now I've got all these pieces that I've made before, and I've kind of tweaked them so they can be used pretty much on anything I want. And I just have to figure out, okay, do I want an arch or do I want like a straight line?
Okay.
Just kind of, you get to make higher level decisions instead of like, oh man, this regex isn't quite capturing this one thing. Now it always captures it. It just works.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's really cool. So just as a recap, iterative design is a design methodology where you make small incremental changes that can then be further improved upon or easily undone.
Yes.
Always in the goal of figuring out what to do, taking action, testing it, getting feedback, repeat the process.
Getting more meaningful iterations.
And getting better.
Yes.
Getting better over time. And this applies to everything from baking to artificial intelligence model design.
Oh, yeah.
Anything in between. Anything between artificial intelligence and baking, which I realize is just A and B, 2 letters. I can't think of anything that starts with Z.
Oh, that is right.
But,
Zumba.
Zumba.
You get better at Zumba.
There you go. So, but those two practices are very different.
Yes.
Right.
Very.
So, all right, very cool.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate your time today and going over that with us. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Please tune in next Wednesday for another Man versus Tech.
Yeah.